The deafening crack of the auctioneer's gavel shattered Madeline Winter's world into 1,000 pieces as she stood on the porch of her family's ranch house, watching strangers inspect what had been her home for all 26 years of her life. The Lazy W Ranch outside Brownsville, Texas, had been in the Winters family for 2 generations, but today, in the sweltering summer of 1876, the bank was for closing, and Madeline was about to lose everything. Final call. $2,000 owed to the First National Bank of Brownsville. Property to be auctioned in 3 days unless debt is settled in full. The bank's representative, a thin man named Silas Jenkins, announced with all the emotion of someone reading a grocery list. His eyes, hidden behind wire-rimmed spectacles, never quite met Madeline's as he posted the notice on her front gate. "Mr. Jenkins, please." Madeline stepped forward, her brown cotton dress billowing slightly in the hot Texas breeze. "My father built this ranch from nothing after the war. Surely after all the years of doing business with the bank, you can extend the deadline." Jenkins adjusted his spectacles, finally looking at her with something resembling pity. "Miss Winters, I've extended your deadline twice already. The drought has affected everyone, not just you. The bank's patience has run out." As Jenkins mounted his horse and trotted away, Madeline felt her chest tighten. The drought that had plagued South Texas for nearly 2 years had slowly drained her resources. First, she'd sold off half her cattle herd just to keep the remaining animals fed. Then her ranch hands had gradually drifted away, seeking work elsewhere when she could no longer pay them. Her father had died the previous winter, some said from pneumonia, but Madeline knew it was a broken heart as he watched his beloved ranch wither away. She walked back to the house, her boots kicking up dust from soil that had once been rich and fertile. Inside, the home felt hollow with just her and Maria, the elderly Mexican woman who had helped raise her after her mother died in childbirth, remaining. "What did the bank man say, Nina?" Maria asked, her weathered hands wringing a dish towel. Madeline swallowed hard. 3 days, then they auction everything. "Dios mio," Maria crossed herself. "What will we do?" "I don't know," Madeline admitted, sinking into her father's old chair. "I've written to every relative we have. No one can help. I've tried to sell more cattle, but at current prices it wouldn't be enough." She stared at the ceiling, blinking back tears. "This land is all I have left of them, of my father, of the grandfather I never knew. I can't lose it, Maria." Maria placed a comforting hand on Madeline's shoulder. "Perhaps a miracle will come, Nina. Your father always said God watches over fools and winters." Madeline managed a weak smile. "I think we need more than God right now. We need about $2,000. The next morning, Madeline rode into Brownsville with what little hope she had left. The dusty streets were busy with the usual traffic, merchants opening their shops, ranchers in town for supplies, and the occasional group of soldiers from Fort Brown. She tied her mare, Penny, outside the general store and stepped inside. "Morning, Miss Winters," called Otto Schmidt, the shopkeeper. His round face showed the same sympathetic expression everyone in town had given her lately. News traveled fast in Brownsville. "Morning, Mr. Schmidt." "I need some coffee and flour, please, the smallest amounts you sell." Schmidt nodded, gathering her items. "Heard about the bank notice, terrible business that." "Yes, well, these things happen," Madeline replied, trying to maintain her dignity. "Your father was a good man. Helped me when I first came to Texas, gave me credit when no one else would." Madeline nodded, her throat tight. "He believed in people." "Too bad the bank doesn't believe in people the same way," Schmidt said, wrapping her purchases. "That'll be 50 cents. As Madeline counted out the coins, the shop door opened, bringing in a blast of hot air and dust. She didn't look up until she heard Schmidt's surprised greeting. "Well, look what the wind blew in. Nathan Forrester, thought you'd left these parts for good." Madeline turned to see a tall man removing his hat as he entered. Dust covered his clothes, and his dark hair was too long, curling slightly at the collar of his shirt. He had a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble, and his eyes, a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Hello, Otto," the man said, his voice deep and pleasant. "Just passing through on my way to San Antonio." Madeline recognized the name immediately. Nathan Forrester had been the foreman at the neighboring Cross T Ranch years ago before leaving to try his luck in the gold fields of Colorado. There had been talk of some trouble before he left, something about a saloon fight and a man badly injured, but Madeline had been away at school in Austin at the time and knew only rumors. "Nathan, you remember Madeline Winters, George Winters' daughter?" Schmidt gestured toward her. The man turned those blue eyes on her and recognition dawned on his face. "Miss Winters," he said with a respectful nod. "It's been, what, 7 years?" 8, she corrected, surprised she remembered. She had been 18 the last time she'd seen him, home from school for summer break. He'd tipped his hat to her at a town social, but they'd never properly spoken. He'd been 24 then, already with a reputation as a skilled horseman and a bit of a wanderer. "Sorry about your father," Nathan said. "I heard when I was in El Paso last month. He was a good man." "Thank you," Madeline replied automatically, the words having become so familiar over the past months that they'd lost meaning. An awkward silence followed until Schmidt cleared his throat. "Nathan here struck it rich in Colorado, from what I hear. One of the lucky ones." Nathan shrugged modestly. "Lucky enough." Madeline gathered her small purchases and nodded politely to both men. "Good day, gentlemen, and welcome back to Texas, Mr. Forrester." She left the store quickly, not wanting to engage in more pitying conversation about her circumstances. As she untied Penny, she heard the door open behind her. "Miss Winters?" She turned to find Nathan Forrester following her out, hat still in hand. "I don't mean to pry, but Otto mentioned something about bank trouble at the Lazy W." Madeline stiffened. "Mr. Schmidt should mind his own business. He meant no harm. It's just your father once did me a good turn, if there's anything I might do to help." "Unless you happen to have $2,000 you'd like to donate to a stranger, Mr. Forrester, I don't think there's much you can do." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Instead of taking offense, Nathan tilted his head, considering her. "How long do you have?" "The auction is in 2 days," Madeline replied, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Now, if you'll excuse me." She mounted Penny and left without looking back, unaware that Nathan Forrester's eyes followed her until she disappeared from view. That evening, as Madeline sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the drought-stricken land in deceptively beautiful hues of gold and crimson, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Visitors were rare these days, especially as dusk fell. She reached for the shotgun her father had always kept by the door. A rider appeared, silhouetted against the setting sun. As he drew closer, she recognized the broad shoulders and easy posture of Nathan Forrester. "Evening, Miss Winters," he called, dismounting at a respectful distance. "Mr. Forrester," she acknowledged, keeping the shotgun visible but lowered. "It's a long ride from town this time of day." "I wanted to speak with you," he said, removing his hat. "In private." Madeline studied him warily. "Whatever you have to say can be said right here." Nathan nodded, respecting her caution. "I want to help with your bank situation." "As I said in town, unless I have the money," he interrupted quietly. Madeline fell silent, staring at him in disbelief. "I can pay off your debt," he continued. "All of it." "Why would you do that?" she asked, suspicion rising. "What do you want in return? The land?" "Because I don't want anything," Nathan said firmly. "Your father helped me once when no one else would. I'd like to return the favor." Madeline's grip tightened on the shotgun. "Mr. Forrester, I may be desperate, but I'm not naive. No one gives away $2,000 without expecting something in return." Nathan sighed, stepping closer. In the fading light, his face looked weary but determined. 8 years ago, I got into a bad situation. A saloon fight that went too far. Your father could have had me arrested, maybe even hanged. Instead, he gave me a chance to leave town, to start fresh. He said sometimes a man needs a second chance to become the person he ought to be. Madeline remembered now the injured man had been one of her father's friends. Her father had never explained why he hadn't pressed charges. "I took that chance," Nathan continued. "Went to Colorado, worked hard, got lucky in the gold fields. Now I've got more money than I need and an opportunity to repay a debt that's been on my conscience for years." "So this is about clearing your conscience?" Madeline asked, maybe partly, he admitted. But it's also about doing what's right. Your father believed in me when he had no reason to. I'd like to honor that by helping his daughter. Maria appeared in the doorway behind Madeline. Nina, invite the man inside. The mosquitoes are getting fierce. Madeline hesitated, then relented. Would you like to come in, Mr. Forrester? We don't have much to offer, but there's coffee. Inside, around the worn kitchen table, Nathan explained his proposal. He would pay the bank the full amount owed. The ranch would remain entirely Madeline's. He wanted no ownership, no stake, not even acknowledgement. I don't understand, Madeline said, cradling her coffee cup. You could buy your own ranch with that money. I've had my fill of owning things, Nathan replied. Been moving too long to want to settle just yet. And what happens after? You just ride away. That's the plan. I'm headed to San Antonio, then maybe California. Maria, who had been quietly observing from the corner, spoke up. Why not stay a while, senor? The ranch needs strong hands. Maria, Madeline protested. It's true, Nina, you cannot run this place alone and you cannot afford to hire help yet. Nathan looked thoughtful. I could stay a few weeks, help get things in order before I move on. We don't need charity, Madeline said firmly. Not charity, Nathan corrected. Call it earned wages for your father's mercy years ago. Madeline wanted to refuse. Pride demanded it. But practicality and the desperation of potentially losing everything won out. Very well, she said reluctantly. If you're determined to do this, I won't stop you, but I insist on drawing up papers saying this is a loan that I will repay. If that makes you feel better, Nathan agreed, though his expression said he had no intention of collecting. The next morning, they rode into Brownsville together, an awkward silence between them. At the First National Bank, Silas Jenkins couldn't hide his surprise when Nathan counted out $2,000 in gold coins and banknotes. You're a fortunate woman, Miss Winters, Jenkins remarked as he prepared the receipt. The debt is paid in full, Nathan said firmly. The foreclosure is canceled. Of course, Mr. Forrester. Jenkins' tone had turned deferential in the presence of so much money. I'll have the documents drawn up immediately. Outside the bank, Madeline turned to Nathan, struggling to find the right words. Thank you doesn't seem adequate. It's not necessary, he replied simply. I told you I'm just repaying a debt. Still, I insist on signing those loan papers. As you wish. As they walked toward the lawyer's office, Madeline studied her unlikely benefactor. Did you really strike it rich in Colorado? Nathan smiled slightly. Rich enough, found a decent claim near Central City. Worked it for 6 years before selling out to a mining company, and now you're just traveling, for now. Thought I might see the Pacific Ocean, never have, you know. Why come back to Texas first? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Unfinished business, I suppose, needed to make things right before moving forward. The lawyer, a heavy-set man named Herbert Wilson, drew up the papers. Madeline insisted upon a promissory note for $2,000 with no interest, and no specified repayment date. Both she and Nathan signed, though she noticed his bemused expression as he did so. Well, that's settled, Nathan said as they left the lawyer's office. Your ranch is safe. Our agreement isn't, Madeline reminded him. You said you'd stay to help for a few weeks. I did say that, didn't I? He looked at her with those striking blue eyes, and for the first time, Madeline noticed a hint of humor in them. I keep my promises, Miss Winters. Madeline, she said suddenly, if you're going to be working at the ranch, you might as well use my given name. Nathan, he returned with a nod. That evening, Maria prepared the best meal they'd had in months to celebrate, using precious preserved vegetables from her garden and the last of their smoked beef. As they ate, Madeline found herself studying Nathan covertly. He was different from the man she vaguely remembered from years ago, more weathered, certainly, but also more settled in himself somehow, despite his claims of wanderlust. You said my father helped you, she ventured, but you never explained exactly what happened. Nathan set down his fork, his expression turning serious. You sure you want to know? I think I deserve to, he nodded slowly. There was a man, Richard Tanner, local rancher. He accused me of cheating at cards. I wasn't, but he'd been drinking heavily. Words were exchanged. He threw the first punch, but Nathan paused. I hit him harder than I meant to. He fell badly, cracked his head on the corner of a table. For a while they thought he might die. Madeline remembered Richard Tanner, an irascible older man who'd eventually recovered but never regained full use of his left arm. Your father was friends with Tanner, Nathan continued, had every right to see me jailed. Instead, he came to me the night before the sheriff was planning to arrest me, said he'd spoken to Tanner and if I left town immediately, there'd be no charges. That sounds like my father, Madeline said softly. He told me something I never forgot. Said violence was easy, but living with its consequences was hard. Said he thought I was better than my worst mistake. Nathan's voice had grown quiet. No one had ever believed in me like that before. The room fell silent except for the soft crackling of the fire in the hearth. Maria quietly excused herself, leaving them alone. He was good at seeing the best in people, Madeline finally said, even when they couldn't see it themselves. A rare quality, Nathan agreed. I've tried to live up to what he saw in me. Is that why you're here, paying a debt to a dead man? Nathan's eyes met her steadily. Your father saved me from a path I didn't want to be on. That deserves more than money can repay, but yes, this is part of it. And the other part. The other part is seeing his daughter about to lose everything through no fault of her own and knowing I could help. He shrugged. Seemed simple enough. Nothing is ever simple, Madeline replied. Some things are, Nathan countered. Doing right when you can, that's simple. The how and why might get complicated, but the choice itself is simple. The following days established a routine. Nathan rose before dawn and worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, tending to the remaining livestock, and addressing the many maintenance issues that had been neglected during the financial crisis. Madeline worked alongside him when she could, though she often caught herself watching him, the efficient way he moved, the quiet competence in his hands, the occasional small smile when something went right. They spoke little during the day, exhausted by the physical labor in the Texas heat. But in the evenings, after Maria had retired, they often sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge while sharing cautious conversations that gradually grew more comfortable. Why didn't you ever marry? Madeline asked one evening, surprising herself with the boldness of the question. If Nathan was taken aback, he didn't show it. Never stayed in one place long enough, I suppose, and after what happened here, well, I was focused on making something of myself first. And now, he glanced at her, then back at the stars. Now I wonder if I've been running from settling down rather than toward anything in particular. A week into Nathan's stay, a summer thunderstorm finally broke the drought. They stood on the porch, watching the rain soak the parched earth, the smell of wet dust rising around them. First good rain in months, Madeline said, breathing deeply. Maybe things are finally turning. Maybe so, Nathan agreed, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. A sudden gust of wind blew rain onto the porch, spattering them both. Madeline laughed, the sound surprising even herself. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed freely. Nathan turned to look at her, an unreadable expression in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might step closer, might even touch her. Instead, he cleared his throat and stepped back. We should check the north pasture tomorrow, he said. Make sure the wash doesn't damage the new fence line. Madeline nodded, ignoring the curious disappointment she felt. Of course. The rain continued through the night, a blessing for the land but creating new challenges. The next morning, they rode out together to inspect the property. The North Creek, dry for months, now rushed with muddy water, threatening to overflow its banks. We need to reinforce that crossing, Nathan said, pointing to where the creek intersected with the main cattle trail. Otherwise, it'll wash out completely. They worked side by side for hours, moving rocks and fallen branches to create a natural barrier. The physical labor was exhausting, but there was something satisfying about working together, communicating with minimal words, anticipating each other's needs. By mid-afternoon, they'd made good progress, but dark clouds were gathering again. We should head back, Nathan advised, looking at the sky. That's going to be a serious storm. They were halfway to the ranch house when the heavens opened. Rain poured down in sheets, turning the trail slippery and dangerous. Lightning cracked overhead, spooking Madeline's mare. Penny reared suddenly, throwing Madeline backward into the mud. "Madeline," Nathan was off his horse in an instant, kneeling beside her. "Are you hurt?" She tried to sit up, wincing. "Just my pride and possibly my ankle." He helped her to her feet, but when she put weight on her right ankle, pain shot up her leg. "Can't walk on it," she admitted through gritted teeth. Without hesitation, Nathan scooped her into his arms. "The line shack is closer than the house," he said, nodding toward a small structure just visible through the rain. "We need to get out of this storm." Madeline wanted to protest. Being carried like this, held against his chest, was far too intimate, but the throbbing in her ankle overruled her pride. She nodded, and Nathan whistled for the horses to follow as he carried her to shelter. The line shack was basic, one room with a small stove, a narrow cot, and some emergency supplies. Nathan set her gently on the cot before securing the horses under the attached lean-to and returning to assess the situation. "We need to get you dry," he said practically, though his eyes carefully avoided meeting hers. "There are some old blankets in that trunk." He built a fire in the small stove while Madeline wrapped herself in a scratchy wool blanket, removing her soaked boots and outer clothing underneath its protection. Nathan did the same, turning his back politely as he stripped off his wet shirt and hung it near the stove. "Let me see that ankle," he said once the fire was going. He knelt before her, gently taking her injured foot in his hands. Madeline winced as he probed the swollen joint. His hands were work-roughened but surprisingly gentle, and despite the pain, she found herself acutely aware of his touch. "I don't think it's broken," Nathan pronounced. "Bad sprain, though. You'll need to stay off it for a few days." "I can't afford to rest," she protested. "There's too much to do." "You can't afford not to," he countered. "Push too hard now and you'll be laid up even longer." Outside, the storm intensified. Rain hammered on the roof and wind whistled through the cracks in the walls. Lightning flashed, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. "Looks like we're staying put for a while," Nathan observed, adding more wood to the stove. An awkward silence fell between them. Madeline was painfully aware of his bare chest, visible each time he moved into the firelight. He was all lean muscle and sun-darkened skin, with a few old scars telling stories of a hard life. "You must think I'm terribly weak," she finally said, needing to break the tension. "Getting thrown from my horse in a little rain." Nathan looked at her in surprise. "Weak is the last word I'd use to describe you, Madeline Winters. What word would you use then?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He considered her for a long moment, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "Resilient, stubborn, proud, sometimes too proud for your own good," his voice softened. "Beautiful," the word hung in the air between them. Madeline felt her breath catch. "You shouldn't say such things." "Probably not," he agreed, turning back to the fire, "but it's true all the same." Another silence fell, this one charged with unspoken feelings. The storm raged outside, but inside the tiny shack, a different kind of tension was building. "Why did you really come back?" Madeline finally asked. "The truth, Nathan," he sighed, running a hand through his still damp hair. "I told you about your father, yes, but that's not all, is it?" Nathan was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. Then, "I never forgot this place or the people in it." He looked at her directly now. "I heard about your father's passing when I was in El Paso, then I heard rumors about the bank foreclosure. I had the means to help, so I came." "Just like that, you rode hundreds of miles on a rumor." "Sometimes a man follows his instincts," he said simply. "And what are your instincts telling you now?" Madeline's voice was barely above a whisper. Nathan moved closer, kneeling beside the cot. "They're telling me I should leave as soon as this storm passes. That staying would only complicate things." "And is that what you want, to leave?" His eyes met hers, and the intensity she saw there made her breath catch. "What I want and what's right aren't always the same thing." "What if they could be?" Madeline surprised herself with her boldness, but something about the storm, the isolation, and the man before her made her reckless. "What if staying was the right thing?" Nathan reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. "Madeline, I'm not the kind of man who stays. I've never been. Your father saw something in me that I'm still trying to live up to. I see it too, she whispered, the moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Then Nathan leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss so gentle it might have been imagined. When he started to pull away, Madeline reached up, her hand finding the back of his neck, drawing him back to her. The second kiss was not gentle. It carried years of loneliness, weeks of growing admiration, and the peculiar intimacy that comes from facing hardship together. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily. This changes things, Nathan said, his voice rough. Yes, Madeline agreed, it does. Morning brought clear skies and a reality they had to face. The storm had passed, but the feelings that had emerged during their night in the line shack remained. They rode back to the ranch house in silence, Nathan supporting Madeline on his horse while leading Penny behind them. Maria took one look at them as they arrived and raised her eyebrows knowingly, but said nothing as she helped Madeline inside to rest her ankle. Over the next few days, Nathan worked even harder around the ranch, as if physical exhaustion might clear his mind. Madeline, confined to the house by her injury, watched him from the windows, her thoughts in turmoil. On the third evening, as Nathan sat on the porch steps cleaning his saddle, Madeline hobbled out to join him, using a walking stick Maria had found for her. "You've been avoiding me," she said without preamble. Nathan didn't look up from his work. "Thought we both could use some time to think, and have you thought about it?" He finally met her gaze. "Haven't thought about much else. And I still think I should leave soon." He set aside the saddle. "Madeline, what happened at the line shack was not a mistake," she interrupted firmly, "unless you regret it." "I don't regret it," Nathan said quietly, "but I'm not sure I'm what you need." "Shouldn't I be the judge of that?" He stood, moving closer to her. "You've just saved your ranch. You need time to get back on your feet to make your own way. I don't want to be another complication." "What if I want that complication?" Madeline challenged, her chin lifting stubbornly. "What if I see a man who came back to repay a debt, who worked harder than anyone I've ever known to help save something that matters to me?" Nathan's expression softened. "Madeline, no, let me finish. All my life I've done what was expected of me. I went to school in Austin because my father wanted me educated. I came back to run the ranch because it was my duty. I nearly lost everything trying to do it alone because I was too proud to ask for help." She took a deep breath. "For once, I want to choose something for myself." "And I choose you, Nathan Forrester, if you'll stay." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. "I've been moving for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay still. Then we'll learn together." She stepped closer, balancing on her good foot. "I'm not asking for forever, just for now, just long enough to see where this leads." He reached for her then, his hands gentle on her waist. "Your father would probably come back to haunt me for this." "No," Madeline smiled. "He'd say you were becoming the man he always thought you could be." Their lips met in a kiss that held promise, a beginning rather than an ending. As summer turned to fall, the Lazy W Ranch began to prosper again. With the drought broken and Nathan's tireless work, the place gradually regained its former vitality. Madeline's ankle healed and she worked alongside Nathan daily, their partnership extending beyond the physical labor of ranching. Nathan's few weeks stretched into months. He built a small cabin for himself near the main house, insisting on propriety despite the growing closeness between them. In town, people speculated about the relationship between the ranch owner and her handsome hired hand, but Madeline and Nathan paid little attention to gossip. They established a routine that suited them both. Days spent working the land, evenings spent planning for the ranch's future or simply enjoying each other's company. Slowly, Nathan began to speak of next spring and next year, words that indicated roots taking hold. In November, Richard Tanner, the man Nathan had injured years ago, died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 68. Nathan attended the funeral, standing at the back of the church, paying his respects from a distance. Afterward, Tanner's widow approached him. "Richard forgave you long ago," she told him. "He said George Winters was right about you." "I'm not sure I've earned that forgiveness," Nathan replied honestly. "You're here, aren't you, not running anymore, that's something." When he returned to the ranch that evening, Nathan found Madeline on the porch, waiting for him. Without a word, he sat beside her and took her hand. "I've been thinking," he said after a while, "about staying, not just for now, but for good." Madeline's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "What changed your mind? At Tanner's funeral today, I realized something. I've spent 8 years trying to outrun my past, trying to become someone different. But maybe the real change happens when you stop running and face who you are, where you are." "And who are you, Nathan Forrester?" He looked at her, his blue eyes serious. "A man who wants to build something lasting. A man who's fallen in love with a stubborn, beautiful woman and the land she fights for." Madeline's breath caught. It was the first time either of them had spoken of love. "Are you sure? You've always said you weren't meant to stay in one place." "Maybe I just hadn't found the right place. Or the right person to stay for." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not saying it will be easy. We're both too stubborn for that, but I'd like to try if you would." Instead of answering with words, Madeline leaned forward and kissed him, putting all her feelings into the gesture. When they finally parted, both were smiling. "Is that a yes?" Nathan asked, his voice teasing. "That's what took you so long," Madeline replied. They were married in the spring of 1877, a simple ceremony in the Brownsville church followed by a celebration at the ranch. The Lazy W was beginning to thrive again, with new cattle purchased from the profits of a good winter harvest and plans for expansion in the coming year. After the wedding, Nathan moved from his cabin into the main house. Their first night together as husband and wife, he presented Madeline with the loan document she had insisted upon nearly a year earlier. "I think we can consider this paid in full, don't you?" he said, tearing it in half. "I'm not sure," Madeline teased, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I think I might be indebted to you for life." "I can live with that arrangement," Nathan murmured before kissing her. In the years that followed, the Lazy W grew into one of the most prosperous ranches in the region. Nathan's experience and Madeline's determination proved a powerful combination. They weathered droughts, cattle fever, and market fluctuations, facing each challenge together. Their first child, a son they named George after Madeline's father, was born in 1878. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later. The house that had once felt hollow with grief now rang with children's laughter and the comfortable sounds of family life. Nathan never lost his restless spirit entirely. Sometimes he would ride to the farthest corners of the ranch and sit looking toward the horizon, as if hearing a distant call. But he always returned home to the family and the life he had chosen. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan and Madeline stood on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the land in gold and crimson, much as it had the evening he'd first ridden up to offer his help. "Any regrets?" Madeline asked, leaning against his shoulder. Nathan looked down at her, at the face he'd grown to love more with each passing year. "About staying, not one. Even though you never did see the Pacific Ocean," he smiled, pulling her closer. "There's still time for that. Maybe when George and Elizabeth are older, we could all go together." "I'd like that," Madeline said. "A family adventure." Later that night, as they lay together in the darkness, Nathan traced the familiar contours of his wife's face with gentle fingers. "You know, I came back to Brownsville to repay a debt, thinking that would free me to keep moving. I never expected to find a reason to stay. Sometimes the things we're running from and the things we're running toward are the same," Madeline replied softly. "You just have to stop long enough to recognize them." "Wise words, Mrs. Forrester." "I married a wise man, Mr. Forrester." As they drifted toward sleep, Nathan reflected on the strange turns life could take. He had come to the Lazy W with $2,000 and the intention of paying a debt. He had stayed because of a woman's courage, her determination, and ultimately her love. The money that had saved the ranch had been a small price to pay for the life. He'd found a life richer than any gold mine could have provided. In the years that followed, the story of how Nathan Forrester had paid the debt on Madeline Winter's ranch and asked for nothing in return became something of a legend in Brownsville. People told it as a romantic tale, embellishing details with each retelling. But Nathan and Madeline knew the true story was both simpler and more complex than the legend. It was the story of two people finding home in each other, of second chances and new beginnings, of debts repaid and gifts freely given. And in the end, it was the story of love that had grown not from grand gestures but from shared work, mutual respect, and the daily choice to remain. A love as enduring as the land itself, with roots that ran just as deep.